Hey guys, in this week's episode, we are going to be talking about the power of the dog. But before that, we're going to be talking about Justin's trip to New York City, Spider-Man No Way Home, and Station 11. So, get ready.
Hello and welcome to the Casual Cinecast, powered by Cinelinx. My name is Chris, and with me as always, a man who's staring at the mountains, trying to see what animal he sees. Mike, how you doing today?
Oh, I'm good. Sorry, I was just staring at mountains.
Yeah, it's a fun thing
Forgot
to do.
we were recording a podcast.
Yeah, favorite pastime of mine.
Yeah.
Also with us is a man who likes to part a herd of cows like the Red Sea. Justin, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for that intro and
You're
giving
welcome.
away my things I do in my personal time.
Yeah, your hobbies.
Yeah. Well, sorry.
Now the
It's
world knows.
really a superpower, really.
Yeah, it's super
Yeah, I
when I do
suppose.
it.
Yeah. If this is your first time listening, normally we like to start off every episode in a section called News on the March, where we talk about film and TV news, or just the TV and films that we have been watching. Then we move into our feature review, and this week, as I mentioned at the top of the show, we are discussing the power of the dog.
That's right. And also here on the Casual Cinecast every other week, or just about every other week, or really whenever we have a free spot in the schedule, we like to put out a Casually Criterion episode. In these episodes, listeners choose a film from the Criterion Collection. We review that film. The listeners choose by voting in a poll that we put out on our Twitter account. So follow us on Twitter. Look forward to our next Criterion poll. Also check out our latest Criterion episode, which was on Bull Durham, and also plenty of other Criterion Collection films that we have reviewed in the past. That's like 4 years worth, just about. Did you guys realize we've been doing this for 4 years?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, I did, because Chris sent a picture recently in the podcast Slack.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Maybe that's why I knew. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah. Google reminded me, as it does every year, apparently.
Yeah. But then speaking of Criterion polls, we put one out with our last episode, Bull Durham, and we have the results for it. Mike, tell the people about the Twitter poll.
All right, so the Twitter poll. Our theme this week was female directors within the Criterion Collection. So we each chose a film, and people voted. So with 43%, Chris won with a film called Mikey and Nicky.
It really feels good. I don't think I've had a win in a very long time, guys. So I appreciate everybody voting for me.
Yeah, I didn't, so don't thank me.
No.
Yeah, me neither.
I voted for me.
So I voted for myself, too. Dang.
And then second place was Fish Tank, which was my choice, with 29%. And then third was One Sings, the Other Doesn't, with 28%. So Mikey and Nicky will be our next Casually Criterion, which is good, because if Fish Tank would have won, I wouldn't be watching a film for the first time. So at least I get to see something new.
Yeah, for sure.
Nice.
Yeah.
And as we mentioned earlier, if you want to vote in those polls, follow us on Twitter at Casual Cinecast. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Casual Cinecast as well, but we are much more active on Twitter. The polls are only on Twitter, so that's the best place. If you want to send us any messages, questions about the movies we're reviewing, send messages to any of those social media accounts or to casualcinemedia@gmail.com. And then, of course, if you haven't done so already, you enjoy the show, you want to let other people know that we're a show worth checking out, go into iTunes, whatever place you listen to podcasts on, give us a 5-star review. You know the drill, I assume.
Yes. Please and thank you. And without further ado, I say we get into News on the March. We got a lot to talk about.
Yeah. Let's go.
Let's go!
News on the march!
Okay, Justin. I feel like you have stuff to talk about because you had a busy week last week.
True.
So why don't you tell us what you have been doing?
Yeah, and I guess that's part of the reason why we haven't had an episode out in a couple weeks, because I've been absent, and we just haven't put out an episode while I was gone.
Yeah, we planned on one, but then it got rescheduled a couple times, and we were like, let's just wait for Justin.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I am excited to talk about the movie they're reviewing this week, and would have been sad if I'd watched it, to catch up and be able to listen, and realized I wasn't able to talk about it, because I'm looking forward to talking about it. But the reason that I was gone was because I went to New York City last weekend, December 14th to 17th, roughly, and spent a few days there with my wife. It was kind of a 3-year anniversary of our proposal there, and basically just a trip for like no real reason. But the thing that I figure you guys will find interesting, and maybe people listening to this, was that we went to see To Kill a Mockingbird, starring Jeff Daniels, and written by Aaron Sorkin. We saw that on Broadway.
Ooh.
Yeah, and that was very cool. It was a very cool version, very different than what I remember the film and the book being, and it was really fun to watch with my wife, because I don't think she's seen To Kill a Mockingbird, the movie, ever, and probably hasn't even read the book since high school, and so she really didn't remember anything about what it was about or what was going to happen in it. So it was really fun to see this kind of timeless story play out and watch her reactions and stuff. So for those who don't know To Kill a Mockingbird at all, it apparently works really well.
Nice. How is it different than the movie or the book? Like, what did Aaron Sorkin do to this to make it his own?
Well, it is mixed up and not chronological, for one. Wow. Yeah. So there is continually scene changes. So if I remember correctly, the book and movie both go pretty chronological and kind of culminate in the trial.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like this one, there'll be like a quick set change, and they'll bring out all the pieces for the trial, and you'll see like one witness from the trial, and then you'll get they'll switch to other scenes and do other scenes from like earlier before the trial, and then you'll go back and you'll hear the second witness, right? And then more scenes. So it's out of order like that. It's also very much told from the kid's perspective, which I can't remember if the book or the movie is quite as from their perspective. Like the kids are kind of your storyteller. They break the fourth wall, talk to the audience.
I think it is. I think it's mostly from Scout's point of view.
Yeah, I think it is. They really lean into that then in this, because they're Scout and Jim and their friend whose name I can't remember.
Yeah.
They all talk and tell the story and kind of explain what's going on constantly, and give their thoughts and their opinions. And they're all really great. Of course, Jeff Daniels is great as Atticus Finch. I think I saw like a poster saying that Greg Kinnear was going to take over for him soon. So I'm sure he'll be just as good, but Jeff Daniels is really great.
Yeah, Greg Kinnear, he has a kind face. I can see him being a good Atticus Finch. Yeah,
I was kind of far up and high, so I don't know if I could tell how kind his face was if I didn't know who he was already.
Like, I can't see it, but I believe he's got a kind face.
Yeah, but really worthwhile. And I don't know that play will go anywhere other than Broadway, but if you're ever in New York, I would highly recommend checking that one out. If it tours around in any way, shape, or form, definitely worth checking out. It's good stuff.
We're going to get some kind of... This is me not knowing anything, but I would wager that we'll get some kind of either filmed play a la like Hamilton, because it was it's a really kind of big deal. A lot of plays up there happen and I don't hear about them at all, but like when they make it down here and like the news of it makes it down my way, I feel like it's a much bigger deal. So I feel like we might get some sort of filmed version of it, whether it's an adaptation or just like the filmed play.
Yeah. Well, I think when Aaron Sorkin writes something, it usually makes news everywhere.
True enough.
And, with this play, I assume this is what sparked things to go on. But I think this was actually been in production before COVID and was halted due to COVID, and has recently like started to, you know, have performances again. But on the heels of Black Lives Matter and the things that happened right around the start of COVID and just before that, you know, it does have extra weight, I think.
Sure.
And I can't imagine this happening, but there was a couple of things that were said, some lines that were delivered that you had audible reactions from audience members. You could hear like someone go like, you know, that's right. You know, like to like when they made some sort of grander point, like I think the line specifically was talking about how the evil people will come dressed as like a religious person, you know? And I think you could feel the energy in the room and in a way that like I hadn't necessarily felt with To Kill a Mockingbird before, just because it's so prevalent right now, what it's talking about. And it just feels all the more powerful, I think, than it ever did to me. Not just as a kid covering it in school, but also as a teenager, early 20s, whenever it was that I watched like the movie. So that's also it's got that going for it too.
As you say that, it sounds like an Aaron Sorkin project, right? Because like when I think of Aaron Sorkin, I think of like a lot of like lines of dialogue in his movies where like you as the audience member are supposed to just react. You know what I mean? Like he's always pausing his scripts for someone to say something really smart and witty as like a punctuation to a scene.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Cool.
Well, that was kind of the main thing. I mean, the rest of New York, it was a New York trip. We saw Central Park. We ate hot dogs. We had pizza. We had other good food. We went to a taping of Jimmy Fallon. That was also pretty fun, but nobody I know seems to really actually like Jimmy Fallon that much, so I assume most people don't care.
Yeah. That's cool that you went to a taping of a show. Sucks it wasn't Jimmy Kimmel instead of Fallon, but that's okay.
Yeah. Well, I think Kimmel tapes in LA.
Oh, that makes sense then.
Otherwise,
it'd be tough.
I might have gone for that, you know?
Yeah.
So, oh well. But anyways.
Remember whenever Jimmy Fallon was in Jurassic World?
No.
Wait, was
he?
he
Not.
Yeah, like the kids when they're like driving around on that ride, that little like clear ball. Jimmy Fallon's like the little like in park instruction guy. Like he like worked for, like it was actually like him as Jimmy Fallon being like in the movie.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, okay.
As,
that
like,
makes
himself.
more sense.
Yeah. Well, Jimmy Fallon can play himself. I think we've established that.
Yeah.
Over seeing him do things.
Real good
That's
at
cool,
that.
man. So it was a successful trip, I see.
Yeah, definitely.
And you got back and you didn't get COVID, right?
Yeah. I just got tested last night, actually. We waited a little while because, you know, right after we left, a bunch of COVID cases spiked there, you know, and it's all over the place. And so we waited an appropriate amount of time for it to settle in or whatever it was going to do. And got tested and negative. So there we go.
Huzzah.
Now I can have Christmas with my other negative tested family members too.
Yes. Well, cool, man. That sounds like a fun trip.
Yeah.
Glad you had fun.
Yeah, definitely. So moving on from that, I will turn it over to you guys. So Mike, what do you got?
So this week I saw a little film that not many people saw, apparently.
Oh, no.
Which is, of course, a lie because everyone in the world saw this movie. I'm talking about Spider-Man No Way Home. And
yes.
Chris, I believe you saw this as well, right?
Yeah, I sure did.
Yeah. So I got to say, I am a intermediate Spider-Man fan. I'm not a guy who reads comic books, but when I was a little kid, Spider-Man was always my guy. The one I liked the most.
You know, the cartoon.
Yeah, I liked the cartoon. I just liked him more in general than, like, let's say like a Batman or whatever, right? Spider-Man was my guy. I had a great affection for the first two Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, especially 2. Haven't seen 3, or actually I did. I watched 3 again before this one, but I hadn't seen Spider-Man 3 since theaters initially. And I recently just caught up on the Amazing Spider-Man movies. So anyway, all to prepare for this movie. And I gotta say, I really enjoyed this movie. It was a crowded theater, so that made me a little nervous, but I decided to risk it anyway because I feel like avoiding spoilers for this movie would have been impossible based on how I use Twitter and YouTube and stuff. It would have just simply been impossible. I would have been spoiled immediately. So I kind of wanted to just get it out of the way. But yeah, I really enjoyed this film quite a bit. It was more emotional than I thought it would be. It's satisfying in a way that I didn't think it would be based on the plot. I thought it was going to be like kind of a fan servicey mess. And it is fan servicey, but in a way that I think is written really well and pulled off in a way that I think is effective and rewarding. So yeah, I'll try to be vague, but Chris, what do you think of this movie?
Yeah, the lead up to this movie was kind of crazy because it was almost impossible to like avoid certain things that were announced about this movie and things like that. So, and they kept adding stuff to it, and I did not have high hopes for this movie, but I really liked it as well. And I actually watched The Amazing Spider-Man as well, and I'm glad I did. They're not great movies, but it kind of paid off in this movie. That's what's so amazing about this movie is like it does a lot of different things, and it really shouldn't work. But it's kind of like a season finale of a TV show, and it works really well as that.
It works as a capper to things that didn't have one before. Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 just sort of ended, and you're like, well, that was kind of pointless. But this almost acts as like a third movie to a lot of what didn't work about previous Spider-Man iterations.
I really enjoyed it. It's long. It's 2.5 hours, but I don't know that I necessarily felt that length as I would in certain other movies. But it's really just a lot of fun. Unfortunately, like I wanted to go to a theater where like everybody was cheering and stuff. But unfortunately my theater didn't cheer.
Oh, dude, my theater went nuts all the time, frequently. And I was like, this is too much. You guys need to
well, maybe
chill
too
out.
much. Yeah. I don't know. Like I just see those videos of like people at the Avengers, like cheering and stuff. I'll watch it by myself. And then I'd like to have that experience. Maybe it's when I go to the movies.
Maybe you're going to crappy theaters with old people. I don't know. To me, this was like the most lively audience since Avengers Endgame, which wasn't that long ago. But
yeah,
but like the audience was like they were into it, and they were responsive and laughing and cheering and all kinds of stuff in this movie.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's worth seeing. And there's people that don't necessarily that I've heard and complain about this film, and you know what? I don't think that they're exactly wrong about their complaints. But you know what? It's just like to me, it's just fun. Like you get to see these things like happen. Being vague, but like, and it's fun. And I really like Zendaya, however you pronounce her name, and Tom Holland is those characters, and it's just. I don't know. I've enjoyed all the Spider-Man in the Marvel universe. So yeah, I think it's real good.
Yeah. What I will say about this one is I think it lines up tonally a lot with I think what made the first two Sam Raimi Spider-Man so good, and what probably the Amazing Spider-Man 2 wanted to do a lot, which is this idea of really hitting home that in order to be Spider-Man, you got to make sacrifices somewhere. Like, you can't have everything. And I feel like that's been sort of missing from the Tom Holland era Spider-Man movies. And it was picked up with this one in a way that I was really relieved for, because to me, what's always been so appealing about a character like Spider-Man is he's a character that constantly has to deal with loss and sacrifice to be good and to be a hero. So I don't want to say any more than that, but there are stakes in this movie that I think have been sort of missing from the previous Tom Holland ones that I think really works in this one. Plus, more Doctor Strange, which I have enjoyed him, and especially in all the movies that are not his. Like, I think Doctor Strange is good, like a good movie, but I thought it was like a traditional origin story. But I've really enjoyed what they've done with Doctor Strange and like the Avengers movies he's in, and with this one. And so, Benedict Cumberbatch is a cool guy.
Talk a little bit more about him later.
Yeah, this up-and-coming young guy.
Yeah.
So, I guess it's not really much else to say about this movie right now since we're in non-spoilers, but everyone should see it. Yeah, go. Question.
So, do you think that you need to be caught up on most of the Marvel stuff before seeing this? Probably, maybe with the exception of Hawkeye.
No, not really. Like, I think this movie deals a lot with like the end of Loki in a sense, but like even then you don't have to see that to really get it.
I think it's it's more important that you've seen the Spider-Man movies.
That you've seen like the previous iterations of like both Andrew Garfield movies and the Tobey Maguire movies. But yeah, you don't need to know what's going on with Hawkeye or Eternals or Shang-Chi or any of that stuff.
Okay. Well, that's fun. I need to catch up on those anyways, and I want to. I just haven't. So.
Yeah, well, I think Shang-Chi's on Disney Plus now, so you can actually watch that one. That one is fun in like a kung fu movie kind of way.
Yeah, once again, like origin story, and well, we're not talking about Shang-Chi, but it kind of falls apart towards the end, I think, in my opinion. Like CG falls apart.
That's Marvel.
Yep.
Yeah. What film doesn't? And that's my
Spider-Man
beef
No
with
Way
Power
Home
of the
doesn't.
Dog.
I don't think. There's definitely some CG in it, but I think it holds together the whole way through. But yes, Power of the Dog does not fall apart with CG.
It's a CG mess at the end.
that dog, man,
in
it
the
didn't
mountain.
look good. It didn't look good. Kidding.
Okay, so last thing we got here, unless Chris, you want to say anything else about Spider-Man No Way Home?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Then what else would you like to talk about today, sir?
I just wanted to make a quick pitch to you guys about a new TV show that just came out. They dropped the first 3 episodes on HBOMax called Station 11. Have you guys heard about this?
No.
Yes.
Other through me. It's based on a book called Station 11, which I haven't read, but I think I will after the show is done. It's really a unique story, even so. It's a pandemic story. A flu comes along and like kills 99% of the people. And what I'll say is, I wouldn't necessarily have when they were making this film. They like shot episodes 1 and 3, and it's actually filmed by those episodes. Hiro Murai, remember him? He did a couple episodes that we really liked from Barry.
Yeah,
and he did some Atlanta episodes.
Childish Gambino video.
Yeah. What?
He did that really popular Childish Gambino music video.
Yeah.
This is America.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
But I've liked Hiro Murai's, like the Barry episode he did was really great, I feel like. Anyways, he does the first and third episode here, and they actually filmed those pre-pandemic. So I kind of actually feel a little bit better about it because they're not like trying to cash in that we just had a pandemic, They were already trying to tell the story, and then the pandemic hit, which has got to be weird for them because they're telling a story about a flu, and then all of a sudden, like the flu hits, and, like it's not... Fortunately, we are much better off than they are in the story. But what I would say is the first episode deals with the pandemic hitting, and it mainly just deals with the two characters, a little girl who is in a production of King Lear Garcia, Gabriel Bernal, I can't pronounce his
Gail
name.
Garcia Bernal.
Yeah, Gail, that's it. He's playing
So
King
close
Lear.
yet so far.
Huh?
So close yet so far.
Yeah, typical. But he's playing King Lear, and Himesh Patel is in it, the guy from Yesterday, which I thought he was good in Yesterday. I didn't like Yesterday, the movie, very well, but he was good. And Himesh Patel and the little girl end up like navigating the world as the pandemic is about to happen, and really the first 3 episodes focus on different characters. It's kind of like I would compare it a little bit to Lost. You know how like Lost focuses on different characters, and there's even like the tiniest bit of a mystery that's happening in the first 3 episodes. But what I would say is they're doing the mystery right, whereas like the mystery's there, but you care about what the characters are doing more than you do about like there's this comic book and like what's happening with this comic book, and like people are maybe it just hasn't been really revealed so much as to what this comic book means yet. And then the 3rd episode actually has to do with the guy that played King Lear and then the girl that wrote the comic book, and it's all pre-pandemic, and that's a really great episode. And so there's these 3 like kind of episodes that don't like the characters intermix and like cross each other's paths and stuff like that, but they're not telling like one story. It's really great. And I think it's about, since I've only seen the first 3 episodes, I think it's about art and how like we need art and to tell each other stories and to, because even so in the 2nd episode, it deals with a little girl and she's like going around doing Hamlet with this traveling band of like, the traveling symphony, and they go around just telling stories to each other and stuff like that. It's really great. And they even do like a really great impression of Bill Pullman from Independence Day, the speech, you know. But I would really recommend it. As of recording, when this is Tuesday, we'll have 2 more episodes on Thursday. They're doing like, I think it's 3, and then they're releasing 2 episodes until the last one comes out. It's a 10-episode series, and I think the last one's just 1 episode, if I remember correctly. But, you know, give you guys a chance to catch up, because I'm really enjoying it and interested and intrigued into where this will go. I think it's really good so far. So
interesting. Yeah, I need a new week-to-week show, so this will be good. I know. Actually, pretty soon, Raised by Wolves Season 2 is coming out, speaking of HBOMax.
Nice.
I'll have to check that out, too. But, yeah, I'll probably check this out probably this coming weekend.
Yeah, watch the first 3 episodes together before you, like, really make a judgment. Because I think, I don't know, it's almost like 3 short films is what I would say. Yeah. But it's real good. I like it. And I hope that it lands, you know. The other thing that's really cool about it, too, is it's a limited series. Like, they're going to finish the book. Now, if it's super popular, I always think that, like, there's a chance, like, if they throw enough money at these people, they'll do a 2nd season or something. But as of right now, like, they're like, this is all we're doing. So that makes me excited, too, because that means that they have, like, an end in mind. It's just like a 10-episode movie, you know, like so
yeah, that's cool. I've been interested in it just because I thought it looked interesting, so I will definitely check it out as well. I think if there's any hesitation, it's just pandemic fatigue, you know.
For sure, I completely agree. And I've seen there's been like a couple of shows, like Why the Last Man came out, and I watched like the first couple episodes, and it deals with the pandemic in a very different way. Like, it's mainly from the perspective of these 2 characters, you know, and we're not seeing people like graphic depictions of people dying, you know, like a type of thing. We just seeing these people on this mission, you know, and the stuff that happens around them, and they don't even you don't see it. It's just from their perspective. So I really appreciate that too.
Gotcha.
Interesting. I wonder if by the time the Last of Us TV show comes out that HBO is filming now, people will just be so sick of pandemic type content that
yeah, And that
won't even
actually
watch
crossed
it.
my mind when I was watching this too, The Last of Us. But I think The Last of Us is going to be pretty dark. And this is like hopeful. This is like, okay, our life has changed. Well, how do we move on? Like it's about, it's about art, and then it's also about how art helps you deal with trauma. Does that make sense? And to me, this seems, given the first 3 episodes, it seems a little bit more hopeful than what I would expect out of a post-apocalyptic pandemic show.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Huh. Cool.
Well, great. I'm sold. I'll watch it this weekend too, probably.
Awesome.
Yeah. We'll convene back and we'll discuss notes.
Yeah.
Compare
On the podcast?
Yep. I don't know.
Okay.
No,
Deal.
I don't want to throw that promise out in the world.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, cool.
Awesome. So do we have anything else we want to discuss in News on the March, or should we just march into the news or the feature review, whatever we're doing?
That's it. That's what we'll do.
That one. The March into feature review. That's
Yeah,
it.
there we go.
That's the money.
Open up the gate. Let him out.
You sure he's not ready?
Go on. Let him out.
He's just a man, Peter. Only another man.
A man was made by patience and the odds against him.
For what kind of man would I be if I did not help my mother? If I did not save her?
Okay, so as always with our newer films, we will be doing a spoiler-free section up front. We're just going to give our general thoughts and opinions on the film, not get too deep into it, not give away any spoilers. So if you have not seen The Power of the Dog yet, you can continue listening. We'll give you a warning, a spoiler alert, play a little bumper so that you have plenty of time to pause the podcast, go to Netflix, watch The Power of the Dog, come back, and finish listening.
Indeed. So, The Power of the Dog was directed by Jane Campion. It stars Benedict Cumberbatch, Cody Smith-McPhee, Kirsten Dunst, and Jesse Plemons. The IMDb synopsis says, charismatic rancher Phil Burbank inspires fear and awe in those around him. When his brother brings home a new wife and her son, Phil torments them until he finds himself exposed to the possibility of love.
That should have ended way earlier because, in my opinion,
Yeah.
gives
It's
away a little too much.
A little too much, but also a little too much, like, in the wrong direction to what ultimately this movie ends up being about. But maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah. It may be playing tricks, but
Yeah.
maybe not.
Maybe not.
I don't want to say.
Yeah. We'll
Not
talk
yet.
about that in spoilers.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I kind of know what Chris thinks about it because Chris and I watched this movie like 2 weeks ago, preparing to record this very episode. And so I kind of know what Chris thinks about it. Not too much because we've been avoiding talking about it. But Justin, I believe you probably watched this movie the most recently.
Yeah, unless anyone's watched it since last night.
No. Justin, why don't you get us started on your thoughts for Power of the Dog? The
Okay,
Power
sure.
of the Dog.
The Power of the Dog, important. Probably. But so this movie I didn't really know much about. I think when Chris brought it up as a possibility to do, all he had to say was it was Jane Campion, and I was like, yeah, okay, sure, I'm in. I've seen...
You're a Campion champion.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but I like the pun enough that maybe I will just accept that title
You should get it tattooed.
and run with it, you know. I am a champion for Jane Campion. I love her. She's incredible. Everything she's done is wonderful.
Make a Stan account on Twitter.
Yeah,
I need to re-record the intros now.
that's true. But anyways, so I've seen The Piano, I've seen Bright Star, and one of her earlier films, Sweetie. And Bright Star and Piano, I thought were both films that I enjoyed, even if I wasn't necessarily overwhelmed by how great they were, in my opinion. But the film that I really like of hers is Sweetie. I think that's a really interesting movie, one I've been meaning to revisit because it's been so long since I've seen it, but it certainly was very powerful, and I was surprised visiting that one, having seen The Piano and Bright Star. So she's done things that have wowed me before, so I'm on board to watch whatever she does. So I didn't know very much about this movie. I didn't read this overly long IMDb synopsis that maybe gives away too much.
Yeah.
So went into this blind. I could tell from the picture, the Netflix thumbnail, that it was a Western. So yeah, so didn't know much about it. So I was kind of piecing together what was going to happen as this was going. I thought that it was, first and foremost, exquisitely shot.
Yeah,
I think
for sure.
I think she has a great eye for mood, and one of the things that I remember the most about Sweetie is her really beautiful close-ups of not even necessarily important things that are happening, but things that are around and things that are in the scene, cutaways, and how they evoke an emotion more so than just like here's a cutaway to something else to cover and edit. They always feel really intentional and really emotionally fitting, like whether that's like there's such shallow depth of field that it feels right in the story, or the movement that whatever she's shooting a close-up of has, like whether it's grass waving or something like that,
right.
Always feels right. So that's here. The other thing I'll say about this movie is that it winds like a spring for me. I think I would almost call this a thriller, but like the tension just builds up and builds up and builds up until it releases close to the end, but it also, it releases kind of off screen.
Yeah.
Which I find interesting. And I don't think I won't say much more than that for spoilery, but like, it was an interesting feeling to suddenly be past the point in the story where the spring would have uncoiled and all that tension would have released and the film would have climaxed in an ordinary film. Yeah. And then to kind of be caught off guard and have to put all that together. I found it very satisfying during the last, like, basically 5-ish minutes of the movie. And afterwards sitting there thinking about it. And that's what I think this film does really well. For being the thriller, sort of thrillery, weird, dark movie that it is, it leaves us with more, not necessarily more questions and answers, but more things to fill out than definitive answers. And I really enjoyed that. I think the performances are mostly pretty good. Benedict Cumberbatch, I think, is good like 99% of the time. There was a couple times I thought I heard his accent slipping, and it kind of took me out of it for a second. But I could be wrong about that. I'm open to you guys' opinion. Kirsten Dunst is great. Jesse Plemons is really great. I think there's a tragic misuse of Thomasin McKenzie.
Yeah.
I read an interview where she was like what they asked her, what director do you want to work with? And she said Jane Campion. And I think she was just like, I just want to work. It doesn't matter what part I get.
Yeah.
Like,
I get it. And that's kind of how I thought about it too. It was like, she's probably just stoked to be working with her. And,
yeah.
And that's fine.
I had the same thought though, right? I was like, oh, Thomasin McKenzie's in this? Sweet. And then, you never get to see her really shine.
No, or affect much, really. I thought she was going to affect more at certain points in the film, and that's maybe works well for the mystery of it and like the what's going to happen-ness of the film, right? So
yeah.
Anyways, I really enjoyed the movie. I think it's a great sort of like what's going to happen and tension building movie, and is very satisfying. I'm sure we're going to get into talking about all the different things you could have questions about as we go, but that's one of the most fun things so far is thinking back on all that. But for now, I will toss it over to Chris. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, my thoughts are very similar to yours. This movie looks amazing. And I talked about it a little bit in the intros, but like as that spring is being wound that you talked about, I can watch, Benedict Cumberbatch walking through a herd of cows, like, and it's just tension filled, and it's beautiful to watch. Or Jesse Plemons driving off in his car, it's like this movie, I would say, is slowly paced, but I didn't feel it because I enjoy the scenery, maybe this is my new type of action movie, like just beautiful scenery and a little bit of tension as it gets ratcheted up. But it's really beautiful, and it's really almost these two segments too, you get the first half of the movie and the second half, which I don't want to get into too much because of spoilers. But yeah, I think Benedict Cumberbatch does a good job, and I think the rest of the cast, McPhee is really great in here, and kind of walks a tightrope.
McPhee,
Cody Smith McPhee, yeah, and. Yeah, I really enjoy this movie. It makes me need to do like a Jane Campion marathon. Go back and check her stuff out. I've seen Holy Smoke and a couple other ones, but yeah, I think I'm going to hold off on talking too much further into this because you really said everything, kind of hit everything I wanted to say, and I really want to dive into spoilers here in a little bit. But before that, Mike, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. I am a big fan of this movie. I think the tension that does wind throughout the whole thing is just, like Justin said, expertly crafted. And whenever the tension does release, it releases in a way that is more fun to like engage with and think about than what you think is going to be happening. I don't know. So basically, this movie is just great because, I don't know, you just think you know what you're watching, and then you don't, all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I found that to be great. You think you're watching this just art house story. I don't even really want to get, it's hard to talk about what's so good about this without spoiling things. But yeah, I'll touch on some of the filmmaking aspects. Yeah, it's filmed wonderfully. I think Johnny Greenwood's score is his best one since There Will Be Blood.
I was not paying attention to who did the score, but it's several parts of this movie felt like Jane Campion really loves There Will Be Blood and probably is influenced by it in some way.
Yeah, well,
or
like
thinking about it,
Yeah, like to me, this movie feels like this new kind of like American Western that things like Days of Heaven or There Will Be Blood kind of fit into. I would put Power of the Dog in there with those kinds of films, right? This interesting look at the American West, and it's not so much interested in the archetypes of like cowboys and heroes and all that stuff more than it is about dissecting people and characters and humans and
turning those archetypes around, I think.
Exactly. Anyway, the movie's beautiful, and by the last 20 minutes of the movie, I was just completely, like, my appreciation of it just skyrocketed. Like, I was enjoying it the whole time, and then when it was over, I liked everything more than I thought I was going to like it. While I was watching it.
You spend so much time figuring out what the characters are, doing underneath the surface, right? And what the movie is even about necessarily, and by the end, I mean, you don't necessarily have all of those answers, concretely in front of you, but that's one of the things that works so well about the movie is just, I think I know what's going on. I think I've figured out what's happening.
Yeah. And
then something changes and I have to reorient myself and figure out something new. And that's what keeps it going. I think keeps it from being so, maybe slow paced or feeling like a normal, I feel like you wanted to say drama earlier or something, but yeah, I don't know.
I think, at least for me, like I made assumptions about characters that the movie then was like nope, that's not what these characters are, and kind of challenged me on like, well, why did I assume these things about these characters? And why do I make those assumptions?
And I think that has to do with marketing, right? Like we think we've seen this film before.
Well, that's true. Yeah, like that's the Western, turning the Western
it's
on
the
ear.
Western. It's the character of like the character arc of like Phil Benedict Cumberbatch. Like you think you're like, I see where this is leading, and then it's just not at all that.
Yeah. I think that I'm a step ahead of the movie sometimes,
Yeah.
And the movie's an even further step ahead of me, right?
Right.
Okay,
it knows what you're assuming.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think we should just get into spoilers as soon as possible. Do we just want to go down the list and rate it?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay. Chris, let's start with you.
Yeah, 4.5. I've actually seen it twice, and I 4.5, solid 4.5, and maybe in 5 years it'll be like a 5-star one, go into the canon. But yeah,
I'm personally teetering between 4 and 4.5. And it was 4 immediately when it was done.
Yeah,
and it's maybe slowly moved up a little bit as I've been thinking about it today, and even just as we've been talking.
Yeah. I'm sitting at 4.5, possibly 5 as well. 4.5 right when it was initially over, and I haven't seen it again, but I've often wanted to go back and change it to just a straight up 5.
Wow.
I haven't yet, but I enjoyed this movie tremendously, so much. It was exactly what I needed.
That's awesome.
This year. So,
well, great. Well, then spoilers.
No, I guess Rosebud is just a piece in a jigsaw puzzle.
Any more cigarettes you got up there? I'll tell you all about it.
Things are going to start happening to me now.
And here we go.
Okay, so we talked about, you think the movie has certain things as it's going, and then it kind of twists and it moves into something else, and it's surprising quite often.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say that for a while in this movie, I thought that it was doing this sort of, opposite twisted take on films that I've seen before of like this sort of dying breed sort of thing, like things like The Wild Bunch and a lot of like Sam Peckinpah movies and Monty Hellman westerns, that sort of thing, where it feels like, there's so many of those stories of the old timer and things are changing around them and they can't deal with it,
Real No Country for Old Men situation.
Yeah. So I kind of thought for a while that they were doing that with Benedict Cumberbatch character, with Phil, but just instead of making him like the hero, making him the villain, which is something I don't know that I've seen that much before. And while it was doing that, I thought that it was doing that really, really well, until I realized that it's not necessarily what the movie was doing.
Right.
So I don't know how you guys felt about like early on, but that was what I was thinking the movie was going to be for a while.
I didn't really know what I thought. Like I had a feeling. Well, like basically what I thought was it was going to basically be a love story, and like through Benedict Cumberbatch finding someone he could connect with, he was going to become a kinder, gentler man. Right. And I was like, okay, all right. That sounds fine. Let's do that.
Yeah. At a certain point, I thought that, but not for like the first half of the movie.
I think I that's where I started landing once they were in the restaurant and he was like making fun of the way he talked and like messing with the flowers, the paper flowers,
Yeah.
That's was when I started forming ideas of where I thought the movie was going.
Yeah. I had that same thought too. I was like, there was a lot of tension between them, a lot of really suggestive visuals of, there's not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but there's a part when Phil is making the rope and it cuts to this close up of his hand and he's just like stroking up and down the rope, while he's talking to the kid.
Or when he's cleaning Bronco Henry's saddle.
Yep.
It's just the most intimate way you could clean a saddle.
Mm-hmm. Does a lot of things the most intimate way you could in this movie, which is
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. I think maybe that part I wasn't surprised whenever he started to turn around and maybe reveal some things about his past and maybe his relationship with Bronco Henry, which is that as clear cut as it sounds or as it seems?
Yeah,
I think so.
I think so.
For me, it sounds like that's where Benedict Cumberbatch learned a lot of like the walls you have to put up to protect yourself. I think he goes a little too far. Like basically, I think Bronco Henry taught him how to be masculine, and ever since then, Phil's character Benedict Cumberbatch has basically just been overcompensating.
Right.
For sure.
For decades.
I think we can really see that in the brothers' relationship. You know, like the movie starts and Phil's like, "Oh, we got to celebrate Bronco Henry," and Jesse Plemons' character is just like not talking. Like he's dealt with his brother for long enough, and he's kind of had enough. Like he's he realizes he can't like his brother's so overbearing about that stuff.
Well, it's also like they've been together the whole time. But like, remember whenever Jesse Plemons finally gets Kirsten Dunst to his house, and he like breaks down and cries, and he's like, "It just feels so good not to be alone."
Yeah,
and it's like he hasn't been alone, but this, like, technically speaking, but this shows you like everything you need to know about their relationship, right? Benedict Cumberbatch just struts around, calling him fatso, being a dick.
Yeah.
And it's like, these guys probably haven't had a meaningful conversation in years.
For sure.
You know?
Right.
Yeah.
And I thought the movie was leaning a bit more towards that, overcompensation when you are maybe being like overly homophobic to compensate for something for your own feelings. Mm-hmm. Right. And, while maybe it is that, it didn't feel quite as on the nose as it could have been the whole time. And I think partially, too, is I thought the movie was functions as a bit of a takedown of toxic masculinity, too.
Oh, for sure.
Definitely. Yeah.
And so maybe that overcompensation, while I suspected it at points and it turned out to be the case, I was also just fascinated by watching his toxic masculinity. Like it just kind of, as the times were changing, just it just seemed more and more like awkward and horrible, and just like made him seem like the biggest dick in the world. When I'm sure 5 years before that, 10 years before that, his brother at one point was probably laughing at the fatso thing, right?
Sure.
Maybe that was even started by Bronco Henry,
Yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder how much George, Jesse Plemons' character, knows about Phil and what Phil is wrestling with. Do you think that he understands what this charade that he puts on, this personality, this macho attitude? Do you think he understands it, or do you think that he just doesn't care?
Like understands why he's putting it on?
Right. Because, like, I don't know. I mean, they go on the trails together. Like, I feel like he's got to understand.
Well, it depends on, like, what Bronco Henry was. Like, did Bronco Henry sleep with George? Was that or was it just Phil? He talks about how it got cold and Bronco Henry saved his life because they slept naked together in the blanket or whatever later on when he's talking to Cody Smith McPhee's character. So I don't know. Like, I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah. Well, either he did and maybe George was not that into it in the same way that Phil was.
Yeah.
And maybe it was a little bit, assaulty, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at.
Or it was not like he didn't do that at all with George, and because I think it's pretty clear that Bronco Henry does not mean the same thing to George as it does to Phil.
Yeah, see, to me, I took it more as it was Benedict Cumberbatch's person, not necessarily George's. I didn't even think about George's relationship with Bronco Henry.
That makes sense, especially the way they react. Like George reacts to the drinking to Bronco Henry at the beginning of the movie and stuff like that. It's obvious that Bronco Henry doesn't mean the same thing to George.
Well, I guess my question initially stems from the idea, like, do you think that George understood what Bronco Henry and Phil were to each other?
My interpretation is kind of yes, because my interpretation of George throughout the entire movie seemed to be a disappointment with Phil constantly, and it took me a long time to understand why. And I think what that is it's not disappointment in what Phil did with Bronco Henry or anything, but Phil's covering up of it and the way that Phil is now. And I think there was probably a difference in Phil before Bronco Henry died.
Yeah.
Or maybe even before he met Bronco Henry. And as we said, Bronco Henry maybe taught him to be masculine.
Well, that's what I was imagining, right? Like, he had to have known Phil, like, pre-Bronco Henry, teaching him how to be and, like, how to survive in the world, right? So, like, I imagine he saw quite the transformation in Phil over the years.
Yeah. And he was just so disappointed in him in every interaction between Phil and George. It just reeks of disappointment from George. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And even when he asks him
friendly or brotherly or I don't even know.
Yeah, like he asks Phil to come to the dinner party, because I think Phil, when he wants to turn on the charm, can be really charming, but because he's upset about being asked to take a bath and George's new wife, he decides not to go. And obviously George is not great at conversation, and he's like kind of throwing his wife under the bus by trying to get her to play the piano, which is like the worst scene. Where like just that panic that Kirsten Dunst has on her face is, palpable. You can feel it.
Oh, dude, that scene made me an anxious wreck. I was like, I want this to be over with.
Even before she starts playing the piano, they're just like chatting, and Kirsten Dunst looks like she's on the verge of tears, just like talking to these people, it's horrible.
I mean, like, her life has basically been hell. Like, every time she practices, Phil torments her by being better at the banjo than she is the piano, and I don't know. He just completely seems like a nightmare to live around and be around. And it's so quickly into the movie are we given clues to kind of figure out, like, where the movie actually is going. Like, what is it that Cody Smith McPhee says at the beginning of the movie? What kind of man would I be if I didn't protect my mother or didn't want her to be happy?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the rabbit thing, right? He goes and he shows his mom the rabbit, and then later he has it cut open so heartlessly, and then he breaks that one rabbit's neck later on while being sweet to it.
Yeah, I really like that scene. Thomasin McKenzie comes in with the carrot, and she's like, "Oh, let's feed the rabbit." It's all cut open and spread open. Heartlessly too. I mean, in a callous way by Cody Smith.
Right, and so his character is just so fascinating in and of itself, right? Because it's like, is he like that because he's actually studying to be a physician, so he just actually like kind of has to take a objective, heartless approach to things like that, or is he a fucking psychopath?
So I don't know. A friend told me, or I read it. But like Kirsten Dunst and Cody Smith McPhee came up with a backstory for their characters, and that backstory is that like Cody Smith McPhee killed his dad, and that everything Kirsten Dunst is doing in this movie is to protect everybody else from Cody Smith McPhee. And when you watch it a second time, like she gets rid of the flowers, and you think she's doing it to protect Cody Smith McPhee. Well, maybe she's doing it because she doesn't want him to get mad about it,
Wow. And not wanting them to go off together alone.
Yeah. Like when I watched it the second time, everything was like, no, where are you going? Don't go off there. It's not that she's worried about her son, it's that she's worried about Phil, and I think that there's probably a little bit more nuance to it than that. But I do think that there's, he's like Dexter, I don't know if you guys ever seen that show, and it's not a great show, but somebody that, doesn't necessarily feel right and wrong or attached to things. And he's had to learn to protect his mom, and his mom is kind of his moral compass to a certain extent. And I found that really interesting. And that's kind of like, that character is the one where I assumed I knew what that character was and what he was, and then at the end I was like, oh, I completely underestimated or misunderstood that character. And through the second viewing, you kind of get a little bit better of an opinion, but everything's there, leading up to the end. It's just that it's just right underneath your nose and you're not looking for that, Yeah.
I mean, is the whole catching a rabbit and then suddenly, dissecting it in a cold medical way, is that foreshadowing to what he does to Phil in a way? Because it seems like a sweet thing when he brings the rabbit into his mom, and there is certainly some romantic tension between him and Phil, and I think probably he's putting that on and feeding into that to ensnare Phil.
Well,
yeah,
I took it as the whole movie is sort of building up, and I think he's always going to kill Phil. I think the method of how he does it and the way he does it evolves over time until he sees the right opportunity.
Do you think he was always going to, or do you think that there was a moment that he decided to?
I think he was always going to, once he discovered his mom was drinking. I think he understands that his mom is a fragile soul, or whatever you want to call it, and I think it all stems from the idea, when he arrives there and he realizes what kind of state his mom has been in while he's been away, I think he decides what he has to do. I don't think there's ever a time where he actually genuinely is attracted to or wants to be with Phil in any kind of physical lovey way.
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, I think the movie wants you to think that.
Yeah, I think that's what that's what you're thinking for a long time. But if you go back and even to his earliest scenes, whenever he first arrives, he's like, I made a friend, but I don't want my friends to meet this guy. It's I don't want to bring him here,
Right.
So it's I think he hated Phil from before his mom and George even got together.
Yeah, from that first meeting with the flowers.
Yep.
And
I totally
the whole
agree.
time you think he's warming up to Phil, he's not.
Yeah, it's calculating, it's ensnaring, I think looking back, that whole rabbit thing is basically the same thing.
Well,
I like
there's
the second
two rabbit things. There's the
Yeah.
rabbit he finds and shows his mom and then kills it in the room while he's dissecting it, and then there's the rabbit that he kills with Phil.
I love that one because Phil realizes he has underestimated, he's like, go ahead and kill it, put it out of his misery. And Phil's expecting, no, some pushback from that. But then he just snaps the neck right then and there. And Phil's like, oh,
after loving on it though, that's the thing. He loves on it and makes it feel safe and then snaps his neck.
Yeah. Which is, there we go.
Yeah.
Phil should have seen it coming.
Yeah.
That's exactly what
happens. He gave
happens.
the game away.
Yeah. Which is awesome. I mean, I love those two moments.
Yeah.
Because those are really two of the main moments where things shift, at least for Peter, for Cody Smith-McPhee's character, where you think you know who he is.
Yeah.
And then you're like, wait a minute, I need to spend some time reevaluating.
I like the scene after the dissected rabbit is discovered, and they're going out to play tennis or badminton or something, and Kirsten Dunst is like, well, let's not kill rabbits in the house and dissect them, I think that's funny.
Yeah. What do you make of the scene where they show up to the field and there's the long walk with Peter, where he's walking and everyone's making fun of him and, you know, shouting like homophobic slurs at him and stuff. And then he walks to the tree and then just looks at the nest and everyone kind of shuts up. And then he walks back and it's silent.
Yeah.
Well, I know he's, you know, obviously he's like super invested in nature and he's researching. That's, you know, like he's a scientist, I think, kind of, he understands nature better than he does like humans, I think, or emotion. I don't remember it being silent on the way back. You've seen it more recently than I have. But there's no like, why are they quiet, I guess, on the way back?
There's no heckling. Yeah. And what happens in that scene for the people who are previously heckling him.
Yeah.
I've been kind of thinking about that.
Where he does like kind of start up that relationship with Phil, right? Like at the end of that scene.
Yeah, he comes back and Phil calls him over, and that's when he's showing him the rope and saying, "I'm going to make you this rope," you know, blah blah blah. But and because they're giving it to him, you know, they're being pretty horrible to him, and he stops and he looks. I don't know if it's just people seeing, you know, we are not affecting him at all. And this is not having the intention. I thought I was going to feel superior and dominant. And here he is looking at these birds in the trees and that's all he cares about. And like, I'm less than that, you know, or something.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I don't feel like, I feel like Benedict Cumberbatch was the one that kind of set the tone for making fun of Peter, right? Phil's character did.
Yeah.
And that's the scene whenever Phil kind of turns around on him and he's like, you know what, I'm going to befriend this guy instead of make him an enemy or whatever.
Well, he's kind of seen his secret at that point too, you know, like he's discovered his secret.
Right. And I think it's, I can't speak for like the people heckling him, but like I think for Phil's turn, I think it's like, okay, like he knows and I don't think he's going to say anything.
But I'm going to bring him in close just in case.
Yeah.
Is there, at that point, is there an attraction from Phil? Like, do you think, is there an attraction from Phil?
I think there was always an attraction from Phil.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think his torment is rooted in that.
Yeah, Phil is a very lonely guy because he can't, and he sees what he thinks is an effeminate guy, and he's like, he gives him a hard time because he can't be that way. And then, but also, as he slowly lets his walls down to maybe an option of being with this guy or whatever, it's too late. He's already done too much.
Yeah,
do you think that?
Go ahead.
Do you think there was ever a chance for them?
No.
Yeah.
No, I think he always hated Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yeah. And
I agree.
You know, that was the part where I then thought the movie was going to be. I thought Peter was getting fooled and lured in by Phil, right? You know, for a while.
Yeah.
I was worried for him. And
for sure.
That's what makes the end, you know, so shocking, I think, like whenever suddenly, even when Phil was sick and George was waking him up, right, and saying, we're going to get you to the hospital, I don't think I quite put it together.
Well, right, because there's this really like intimate scene, you know, like, and it cuts away, like they're smoking that cigarette, and you know, like Peter's like putting it to Phil's lips, and it's this really intimate scene, and we're not quite sure what's gonna happen next. You know, like, are they gonna consummate the relationship? And we just cut to the morning where he's like lying in his bed, and you're like, well, what happened? You know, like, why is he sick? Why is he still in his clothes? There's like this mystery.
I thought it was like an infected cut or something, you know.
Yeah.
Or / hangover or something. I don't know. But it wasn't until he was dead, you know, and we see, and even as they're lowering the body into the casket, I don't know about you guys, but I had that doubt in my head of, is this going to be somebody else? Like, who is this? I mean, it wasn't, you see his face and then all of a sudden it all starts clicking together. And I think within a few minutes, the movie's basically over.
Yeah. I really like, there's so many shots that are like the end of The Searchers that are shot through a door to looking out,
right,
you know, on something, you know, whether it's like Jesse Plemons driving off through that doorway, or we're looking through the windows at the very beginning of the movie and we see Benedict Cumberbatch walking by, and then it's repeated again as he's sick and he's like stumbling down. And I love that cinematography, like that. The view in the house looking out, I think, is really great.
Yeah, he's carrying the rope back to him, which is great because not even Phil realizes that he's been murdered, essentially.
Yeah, he's already dead.
He still wants to, like, he probably knows he's dying, you know? And he's like, I still got to get the rope to the kid. Like, that's a perfect plan. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and like when you find out what it is, right? He's like, they think it's anthrax, and then you're in your brain, you're just like, oh, okay, all right.
That was what happened. Then that was the purpose of that.
Yeah,
weird ride he had.
Exactly, because you're like, oh, why is he going out there, and like, why is he gonna, is he cutting open a dead animal? I guess he's just got those studies that he's got to do. You know, he's got to. And then you realize.
Oh yeah, at the beginning, or yeah.
Well, like it's like not even the beginning. It's like the whenever he starts cutting open the animal that he ultimately uses to kill Benedict Cumberbatch by giving him the hide. You're like, he's like, he goes off by himself, like riding. And then you're like, what is the purpose of this whole little section here?
Yeah.
And you think it's just like, oh, okay, more dead animals for this kid to like cut open and look at.
Well, I thought he was like learning to ride to like impress Phil. You know,
right,
like,
but then he pulls over next to like a dead cow or whatever it is.
And gloves up to keep himself protected, which I didn't really think about.
No.
So yeah, and even the shot, the close up of Phil's hands working with the rope in the water.
Like when he submerges them in the water with the hides.
Yeah, like that's the point, right? That's when it happens.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful shot too.
It's such a beautiful shot. I didn't even think about that. I just thought like, wow, this is gorgeous, and that's one of the reasons our close-ups are so great. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you see like the blood like trickling out into the water, and you're just like, oh, what a cool effect in this shot. Like that's pretty. And then later you're like, oh no, that was
the murder.
That was the moment.
Yeah,
which is great. Yeah. And then, so we do have a question from a listener, kind of a listener who. The guy who was going to step in and cover for me and wasn't able to. He had a question that he wanted us to answer. So you guys ready for that?
Yes.
Yep. So he asks, and this is Mike, by the way, from Cinemus Podcast, which is a great podcast. We all recently guested on it, so you can go listen to our episodes on that. But
listen to all the episodes.
It's a shame, real quick before you read it, it's a shame that we didn't get to do the episode with Mike because I actually really want to know what Mike thought about this movie.
Yeah.
He's a big Western guy, so I would like to know what he thinks too, because this is not traditional, you know, as we've kind of discussed. Or that's sort of like New American Western, I think you called it, Mike.
Or just what I was spitballing. I don't know what I called it, but
it worked for me, whatever you said.
Yeah.
Anyways, the question says, did Peter enact his plot to keep Rose and George together, or will he turn his machinations towards George next to take the family fortune?
So, to be honest, I don't know, because if this review and watching this movie has taught me anything, it's that I don't understand Peter at all. He's a mystery to me, but I never got the impression that he was after the family fortune. I think I got the impression that he was protecting his mother at all costs.
Yeah. There's one like solid fact I think that we're given about Peter that we can trust, and that's the very opening line, like, what kind of man would I be if I didn't protect my mother, or however it goes, but it's to that extent. So like, I guess in my head, I don't think that he's going to go after George as long as his mom's happy, as long as his mom is protected, or he feels that she's protected. I don't think that he has any machinations towards money, even, you know, like his machination, you know, what he wants is to, you know, be a surgeon and study.
Yeah. He'll have money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I think... Go ahead.
I just, you know, as his son or like stepson now, you know, he's fine. He can, I'm sure George will pay for whatever he wants to do.
Yeah. I think it's probably financially, ultimately to his benefit to stay with George, because I don't know. I mean, maybe they get the fortune, but there's no reason, like, George isn't necessarily mean to her, but I think if George continues to try to push her out to be the showpiece and makes her miserable in that way.
I don't think George intentionally does that for sure.
I don't think so either, but I don't think Peter would care.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yes. But I mean, they do a really good job. And we haven't talked a lot about George and Kirsten Dunst's like romance, but like there's that one scene where he puts he goes out and he's like the waiter, and there's something so charming about that. He's like, well, I'm gonna be the waiter now, and he goes out there and in that one scene you can understand why they would get married, and also the one where they dance, and really I think it's Phil and this George's need to like kind of push her out, but Phil making her a nervous wreck and George pushing her into a situation that she's not exactly comfortable with. But the combination of those two things, like, is the worst for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That if it's all gravy now that Phil's gone, right?
Yeah.
And George and Rose can be happy together and they can be rich. I don't think Peter is after the money or going to kill George. I think he will if he makes his mom miserable, but I don't think it's about money. So, yeah.
I also think that, like, Benedict Cumberbatch's character kind of turned like their parents against her, because they're not super welcoming in that scene. And then at Benedict Cumberbatch's or Phil's funeral, they're a lot more welcoming and a lot more accepting of her, it seems like. So I feel like the road is a little bit more smooth from here on out.
Well, Phil is such like a commanding personality, right? Like, the guests that came over for dinner all just wanted to talk to Phil.
Yeah.
He has the respect and admiration of all the men, which George doesn't seem to or want. Like all their employees seem to like Phil. So I feel like Phil, we see like the toxic side of him more than anything. But like you said at the beginning, like I think he is generally well liked and likable to most people whenever he's not trying to be a nightmare. I think he's just abusive to like George and people that George holds dear. Yeah.
I think we even see that side a little bit with Peter.
Mm-hmm. Because I buy that Peter could be turning his opinion around on Phil based on the way that Phil's acting, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Not true, but I bought it for a while.
I sure did, yeah. Hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah. So, anything else we want to talk about with this movie?
No, I don't think so. I think we've kind of covered it.
Great.
I mean, I think that question kind of covers the last shot of the movie, right? His turn away from the window as Rose and George are embracing as they're coming home from the funeral, and Peter turns away from the window and he's smiling. You know? I think that question kind of answers that, right?
Yeah, I think I think the implication is it's smooth sailing. I think even her piano lessons will be less intense without Phil being a nightmare.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah.
He was just trying to duet with her,
Yeah.
He was just misunderstood.
Yeah. He tried to reach out via music and it didn't work.
She just didn't get it.
Cool. But yeah, no, that's it. Really good movie, and definitely one of my favorites so far this year.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. And I guess with that, we are done with this episode, right?
Yeah.
Sure are.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you, listener, so much for listening. Thanks, as always, to Jake Wagner Russell for doing our intro and outro music. If you want to hear more of his music, you can do so at soundcloud.com/bobscotch.
All right. Stay tuned to this feed. Our next episode will be... What will it be? Will it be The Criterion?
Licorice Pizza comes out this week.
Oh, Licorice Pizza and Matrix.
Ooh,
yeah.
Man, I would rather talk about Licorice Pizza probably, but
yeah,
who knows? So probably Licorice Pizza then. I think we should.
All right.
Cool.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening. We will see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.